So, was Huw Edwards' sentence too lenient? Criminal defence solicitor Liam Kotrie says the sentence was actually reasonable for the offences committed, but barrister Grace Rose Gwynn believes that although Huw was technically punished legally, the judgment itself does not condemn him. Thank you both for joining us. Liam, a suspended sentence of 6 months, but if for the next 2 years he does nothing wrong, he won't spend a day in prison. And many people think that that's outrageous for a crime for which technically the penalty is 10 years in prison.
Well, it's a maximum of 5 years, but the starting point for this offence was 1 year. It is surprising to me that this case remained in the Magistrates Court and wasn't committed to the Crown Court for sentencing. Perhaps that would have sent more of a message. If he does,
do you think that a Crown Court would have given a stiffer sentence?
Potentially. The person who sent him the images, who was convicted of distribution of the images as a result, was given a 12-month sentence. I don't think that tied the hands of the district judge necessarily, but it's certainly something that he would have had in mind when he passed the sentence that he did.
Okay.
It could have increased to 9 months, for example.
The person who sent the images isn't going to jail either?
No.
No, they received a suspended sentence.
Correct.
Sorry, the reason I said that the maximum sentence for these offences is 10 years imprisonment is because that is what is on the sentencing report issued by the Chief Magistrate.
But regardless, in these circumstances, again, the starting point is 1 year for a Category A image. It's almost always the case when someone is convicted of these offences on the first occasion that they would not go to prison on that first occasion.
One of the reasons...
Rightly or wrongly.
A number of the reasons that the sentence was what it was because of the mitigation pleas that were entered on his behalf, which were broadly accepted by the magistrates. And it's that which has enraged a lot of people. For example, it was said that Huw Edwards failed to get to Oxford University and had to go to Cardiff instead. And people are wondering what that can possibly have to do with the decision decades later to view these awful images. They were told that he suffered depression. Well, millions of people suffer depression and they don't watch this kind of stuff. And they were told that he never actually paid directly to look at these images to the person who supplied them to him, and that the money that he handed over were, quote, gifts, which sounded like a terribly disingenuous defence. Do you think that the sentence was affected wrongly by the mitigation pleas? Because many people do.
Well, we don't know exactly what was taken into account by the district judge.
We do. I've just gone through them.
Well, there was very extensive mitigation put forward, very extensive. And I'm not sure I would have mentioned every single thing that was mentioned by this particular barrister, but we all have our own techniques.
Well, what's not going to Oxford got to do with...
Well, quite. And I don't know whether or not that would have a real effect on a fundamental difference on sentencing. However, all of these things have to be put into context. And there's a context of offending. These aren't reasons why he committed the offence, but they are reasons why he made the terrible decision that he made when he made that decision. But he made that decision. Yeah. That's the important thing. And he has to be culpable for it. He's pleaded guilty. That's the most important thing. This isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. Psychiatric reports doesn't mean that he's not guilty of the offence, but it's context.
One more quick question before we come to the other guest. Why is pleading guilty taken into account in mitigation? Because you could say that he pleaded guilty because he was caught bang to rights, and there was no point in pleading not guilty.
Well, there are a number of reasons, often in cases, and I don't think this would be one, but in a case of domestic violence, for example, if someone pleaded not guilty and the complainant had to come to court, or the victim had to come to court, then they'd be put through that process, that traumatic process, which helps the whole system and that person when someone pleads guilty, stopping that happening, and they're given credit for that guilt.
Yeah. OK. Grace Rose Gwynn, you're also a barrister, formerly a criminal barrister, now specialising in family law. There are a number of different elements of a sentence, aren't there? And one of them is deterrence.
Yes.
And if you don't go to prison for seeing child abuse images and not immediately stopping them, blocking, deleting, reporting to the police, then the idea, as we've already heard from one survivor, this is just a green flag to other child abuse perpetrators.
It is, and I think the sentence is a joke, because not only was he not blocking, but he was actively seeking it by asking for it. He was offered, do you want young pictures? He said yes. And so I think it's his offending behaviour was seeking that type of material. I think the mitigation put on his behalf was a joke as well. He was diagnosed with major depressive disorder based on the fact that he didn't get into Oxford, but also he had daddy issues. And I think we're not in a paranoid schizophrenia realm. I have never done a paedophile case where they haven't raised mental health as an issue. And so for me, it's a cop-out. It's a discredit to those who genuinely suffer with mental health issues. And also, it's outrageous to say that just because he's got mental health issues, it was effectively a gateway into him becoming a paedophile. I think it's an absolute nonsense.
What about the question of payment? It's certainly true that the paedophile who supplied Huw Edwards with these awful images didn't attach a bill and say that that'll be £500, please. But a few days after, he would contact Edwards and say, I think I deserve a present, don't you?
Yes.
And Edwards would then buy him a pair of Nike trainers or send him some cash. Surely that is payment for images.
It absolutely is payment for images, disguised under it being a gift. It's not a gift, it is payment for those images.
So why do you think the magistrates accepted that as mitigation?
I don't know is the answer, and I think it's a joke to the justice system that they did accept that as an answer. Another issue I take is that the probation report said that Huw Edwards posed a medium risk. Prosecution said that he posed a medium risk. Defence barrister obviously argued he posed a low risk, but a risk nonetheless. And the district judge found he posed no risk whatsoever. And so I think there's a lot of criticism that can be made of Huw Edwards' sentence and the conduct of this district judge.
Liam, I mean, I can see technically where you're coming from with all the arguments, but at the heart of this case are a series of children who have suffered the most appalling abuse. And I think anybody is wondering why that is not punishable by a prison sentence. Huw Edwards didn't make these images, wasn't in the room, but he received them.
Yes.
And therefore, anybody who receives them is involved in a cycle.
He is the market.
Of the abuse of children. I cannot understand why the abuse of children is not punished more harshly, and I think many people will be thinking that this morning.
Well, people who commit these offences rarely commit them again after they are convicted. But
is that the case?
That's not my experience, and actually it's progressive criminal offending behaviour. When the defendant has almost saturated the digital content, they then become immune to it or numb to it, and then they seek to increase the gratification and that often leads into direct offending.
I have dealt with hundreds of these cases, and it's very rare, in fact, that people who are convicted or have committed direct child sex offences, physical sexual abuse of children, have also been convicted of possession of indecent images. They don't usually come together. And you may find it strange, but it is, in fact, the case. Again, hundreds of these cases I've dealt with over many years.
There's general agreement that the magistrates did follow sentencing guidelines. They were within those parameters. So that begs the final question. Should we alter those guidelines?
Yes, they need to be increased and more harshly punished, absolutely. It's a slap on the wrist what he's been given, because even if he offends again, he's got a 6-month sentence. That means he'll do 3 months of that. So he's effectively, at worst, going to prison for 12 weeks.
If you'd been the judge in the court, in the Magistrates Court yesterday, what would you have given him?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have deviated from the probation report that he poses a medium risk. And for me, it would have been a period of immediate custody.
How long?
Probably 2 or 3 years.
Which would then have been successfully appealed, because that's the way that the law is. And then this case would have been dragged on, we'd be talking about it more. The situation with these kinds of cases, and this is based on statistics, short prison sentences do not rehabilitate. Community orders, suspended sentence orders, are successful in this way.
But suspended sentences don't deter.
What we need to do here is stop the child abuse. That's what we need to do.
And as I understand it, the police have not identified the children. I'm not talking about public identification.
And they never do. And they never do. They're often in foreign countries, often in Eastern Europe. There are literal studios where this terrible abuse takes place.
And these images could have been recorded years ago.
Absolutely.
Yep. And
but the problem is
over and over
he's
again.
created the demand that the supply needs to feed, and
Exactly
that is
right.
the issue.
And that's why he's been convicted of a serious crime.
All right, thank you both.